As people get used to the new normal, can our behaviours and experiences over the past year help shape and improve how we live?
Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Irish research continues to make advances in human health and the health of our planet.
That's so amazing.
This week on 10 Things to Know About, we're exploring the great outdoors, from the green spaces in our cities to the blue spaces on our coast.
You're making me want to get in.
Good. If we're feeling tired or overly stressed, one of the best things we can do is go outside for a walk. Breathe in the fresh air and recharge the batteries. But the benefits of spending time in nature are more far-reaching than we think.
I'm meeting psychologist Tig McIntyre to discuss the impacts green spaces have on our mental health and well-being.
Nature is a powerful resource. We've got the soundscape of birdsong, we've got the leaves rustling under our feet, we have thermal comfort from the trees. So all these different sensory signals come to us, and that takes us away from some of the stresses of daily life.
And it's not something that you're even conscious of, but now that you're describing it, you know, I'm really delighted that we're here in this beautiful landscape under these trees. It's pleasurable.
It's maybe something we learned about during lockdown. Parks weren't used simply for physical activity, they're used for social interaction, for solace and reflection.
Do you think it's going to be maintainable to continue people enjoying the outdoors as they have been through all the lockdowns?
Yeah, the forest closest to us here went from about 5,000 visits per year to 14,000.
Wow.
So that's a really powerful change in behaviour. It looks like people with 40 or 50 visits to nature over a year, that becomes habit forming, which is why at the moment we don't see a decrease in these behaviours. They're actually still increasing in many parks and forest settings. In the future, we can look at parks in a different way. We can look at them having different properties for different people, to include diversity, have areas for restoration, as we might call them. They allow people to interact. That's an important property we haven't really thought about in previous park design. So Go Green Routes, our European project, aims to foster and cultivate a connection to nature among citizens across 6 European cities. And what we're going to do is leverage that connection to nature in 2 different ways. One is that we're hoping that, they will have increased visits to the green space. We will upgrade the green infrastructure in the cities. The second piece, we're hoping that, and we're going to test, if this connection to nature increases to conservation behaviours.
So if we introduce everyone, not just young people, to nature, they come to value it more, then it becomes really important to them and they also want to protect and cultivate it.
Exactly.
Limerick is one of 6 cities taking part in the project, hoping to spark a revolution in towns across Europe and beyond. Measures to improve green infrastructure could be as simple as planting more trees and putting more benches in parks, or they could be as big as creating greenways to link different parts of the city.
Citizens can be, architects of their own cities. One of the ways we have to do that is to use, a novel method called benchmarking park life. We would walk with people in parks. If they're on a scooter, we'll scoot beside them. If they're on a bike, we'll, cycle beside them. What it allows you to do is get the voice of a citizen, and to be able to amplify that. We can ask the person, is it the leaves? Is it walking on leaves? What is it that attracts you to that area?
Okay.
Do you come there with friends? Is it this part of a weekly habit or a daily habit even? What are the features of the natural environment that have meaning for them? Also, some of these features are, culturally bound. So, for diverse and marginalised groups, perhaps they have different experiences of nature. And we're really interested in trying to hear that.
And what's the future of this research, Tig?
Well, it's a 4-year project, but the real impact is way beyond that. We're hoping it gets, upscaled and replicated. But at the heart of this project are the citizens in the city. They really will decide what the future is.
Since COVID, there's been a renewed appreciation for Ireland's natural landscape and scenic sites, with visits to tourist sites increasing locally and nationally through staycations. But is your trip to the woods or the beach having a negative impact on the habitats there? Or is one of the downsides of having a managed site for tourism that you will always have a loss in biodiversity for the flora and fauna that would otherwise be thriving? For the last 5 years, Andy Torsney has been investigating the impact of visitors at tourist sites along the Wild Atlantic Way. So Andy, does bringing tourists to a site always damage the ecology?
It depends really on the context or the setting, and also who you are. We've been monitoring visitors at a range of different sites to essentially see what do people do, where do they do it, you know, if there's a path, do people stay on it? If there's not a path, what happens to the environment, that type thing. Over the time, we've monitored 26,000 visitors, and we've identified that 75% of all visitors that we observed had no impact. So then what we did is we took the 25% that did have an impact, and we looked at, okay, what caused these people to have an impact? What we're finding is groups such as families would maybe have a bit more chaos in their kind of experience on the site, that they're less well able to be controlled, and therefore there's a lot more damage. They walk off paths a lot. There's a lot of dune sliding. There's a lot of activities that are just problematic in tourism spaces. Each site needs to understand what type of sensitivities they have and then maybe manage it. You know, there's these nice little tracks here where, you know, this is a very sensitive habitat. We don't need to concrete it to have people recognize that, oh, we need to stay on that. There's that kind of obvious management.
Derrynane House is the ancestral home of Daniel O'Connell, sitting on roughly 120 hectares of land. James O'Shea began working as a gardener here in 1978. James, what a lovely day to be here in the Kingdom of Kerry. Tell me a little bit about Derrynane House and the site itself.
Well, the house and grounds were handed over to the state by the O'Connell family in 1965, and then it was officially opened in 1967.
It's not a bad place to wake up in the morning and have to go to work, is it?
Oh, it's a great place between the gardens, the woodlands and the sea. It's great.
So how has everything changed since you first arrived here back in the 70s in terms of the grounds and the amenities for tourists?
Well, there's been changes to the garden for sure. We've developed it a lot. We also have tried to develop the biodiversity aspect of it. And what I'd been advised by any experts in the field was we should have had grazing on the site, on the dunes. We had an employee here, John Moran, who had his own herd, and we got him to graze since 2005. We grazed in the autumn and the winter when there's fewer people around. That's the best time anyway, and the animals aren't there from early spring on. So
yeah, I noticed I didn't see any cows on the...
No, people just see the result. It's been having quite a dramatic effect on the flora, especially of the dunes and the grasslands.
Andy has set up an experiment at Derrynane House to test whether management practices increase or decrease biodiversity.
So what we've done is, in the different plots, we have them set out across the site. First year was we just monitored everything as it is, and then we removed the graze, removed the management practice. And year on year, we've been doing that for 3 years now. And we're now seeing that there's a massive loss in diversity in the plots that are unmanaged. So the management practice is actually having a beneficial effect on the biodiversity in the area.
So you're comparing abandoned sites, which people would associate with biodiversity, just let it run wild, with a managed approach that allows for some species to thrive, essentially, and comparing the two.
Exactly, yeah. Essentially what happens is one of the grasses that we have is called fescue, and that kind of tufty eventually crowds out the other species and causes no light penetration to the ground. So the graze essentially removes that.
Andy has created 20 plots, subdivided into 5 by 5 metre sections, with half of the plots being grazed as normal and half being left without any form of management. You can really see the difference between this patch of ground and that patch of ground. Like, it's really stark.
Absolutely. You can see that it's way less diverse. You've got a lot more of the tufty grasses. It's really outcompeting everything else. There's no light getting to the ground here. Everywhere else, we have around 17 species per square metre. That's the average. And then inside the plots, our average is about 6. So this one is probably at about 3 species per square metre.
I want to take a closer look at the thriving habitat of the managed plots.
We have this guy here, which is red clover. So this is a beautiful red flower. We have these things called autumnalis, which kind of looks like what people would call a dandelion. There's eyebright, this beautiful little white flower, which has kind of medicinal purposes. We have to really recognize why we're getting out to nature. We're getting out to nature to disconnect from this fast-paced life that we have, but then we're walking really quickly past it to get to the end. So it just doesn't really make sense. Like, we need to kind of stop and, like, you know, just really appreciate the small subtleties. The goal for tourism can be no impact tourism. Any tourism destination that has something that could have potential, you know, just engage with somebody. You know, if it's a coastal grassland, you know, maybe move to a cattle grazing regime instead of a mowing, but also just understand your site. Like Derrynane, the OPW here, they made sure that they understood their site and they understood what they had, and then they managed it appropriately.
As the Regional Park Superintendent at the OPW, Chris O'Neill has a keen appreciation of the importance of our national and historic parks.
Obviously, Killarney, people come for the scenery, the mountains, the lakes, and so on. That's what people want to see, whether they're domestic in Ireland or coming from further afield. If that wasn't protected, it probably wouldn't be an attractive location for people to come. So I think because the tourism is so reliant on, you know, you can kind of see around there, like if that isn't nurtured and protected, you know, it's going to have a negative impact on tourism. And these results at Derrynane are actually quite exciting, really. The level of management that's taken place is enabling that habitat us to kind of remain in very high standards and very high quality.
The OPW will be looking at practices that improve biodiversity and whether they can be implemented at other sites.
So I'd like to think Derrynane is one of the front runners there from the work that we've already done. And then from that, you can kind of bring in policies in terms of, do you need to change the way the places are managed? Are there any interventions that could be carried out to just help kind of push things a little bit more towards improving the habitats that are there? In Ireland, we're all quite spoilt, really, because there's still so much unspoilt landscape. I think people probably haven't realised exactly how important it is and how easy it can be to lose that.
For well over a decade, scientists have been worried about superbugs like MRSA and antibiotic-resistant bacteria, but didn't know much about their presence at our beautiful recreational waters until recently. Dervla Morris has been testing water samples from our rivers, lakes and seas for the presence of antimicrobial resistant bacteria.
AMR is antibiotic resistance, and antibiotic resistance is not only a problem in humans, it's also a problem in animals and also in our environment. When we use lots of antibiotics in humans and animals, we're exposing all of our own normal flora, lots of bacteria that live in and on our body all of the time, to lots of antibiotics. And that can encourage the bacteria that are present in and on our bodies and that of animals to develop resistance mechanisms because they want to survive.
So this indiscriminate use of antibiotics has basically disrupted the natural environment, and your project is kind of trying to see where they're ending up.
Yes, so when a human or an animal is given an antibiotic, potentially antibiotic-resistant bacteria develop in their gut, then that waste of that human or animal will be emitted into the environment.
There were concerns that freshwater streams that run across our beaches and into our seawater may contain bacteria that are resistant to antibiotics.
So through the ARREST project, we're looking at various different types of waters and effluents around the country. And we found a particular type of antibiotic-resistant organism called CPE in some of those freshwater samples. So we went to the area concerned, we carried out an investigation to try and work out where was this CPE coming from. We found that there was raw sewage, untreated sewage, being emitted into the seawater at that location. And when we did our various different studies, we found that it was the same organism that was in the sewage, that was in the freshwater samples, and also in some seawater samples that we collected at that location.
The project uses a One Health approach, linking studies from humans, animals and the environment. Teagasc researcher Kay Burgess is leading the agricultural trials.
Our role in the project was to look at the impact of various agricultural practices on the transmission of antimicrobial resistance within the environment and within primary production. We know that antimicrobial resistance can be harboured in the animal gut, so the spreading of manure can potentially lead to spreading of antimicrobial resistance, and then looking at how long after the manure has been spread are you still detecting antimicrobial resistance genes. We did a field trial where we spread different types of farmyard manure on plots and then harvested grass and tested soil at a number of different time points afterwards. We then bring those samples back to the lab. We spread them on a range of different types of agar to select for different types of antibiotic-resistant bacteria. But initial indications are that over time we see reductions in the presence of antimicrobial resistance genes. Another aspect we were looking at is the use of integrated constructed wetlands for water treatment coming from farms, and looking at the influence to these, what's coming in, and the water that's coming out, and the levels of resistance that's present in these waters.
These purpose-built wetlands are sustainable and environmentally friendly ways to treat water. As the wastewater passes through the wetland, microorganisms in the water and on the plants break down pollutants, naturally treating it.
We saw a very clear reduction in the presence of antimicrobial resistance in what was coming out as opposed to what was going in. So this indicates that the process is effective at reducing antimicrobial resistance in the waters.
After discovering AMR bacteria in seawater and freshwater locations around Ireland, Dervla's team started a follow-up project to investigate whether we could be harbouring AMR bacteria in our bodies.
Through the PEER project, what we're looking at is if you are exposed to antibiotic-resistant bacteria in the environment through swimming, through kayaking, through other water-related activities, are you more likely to be colonised or carrying those antibiotic-resistant organisms compared with those that maybe don't use the waters as much?
And what does it mean for people if they are colonised?
So if you're a healthy person, your immune system is fully competent, you've got no underlying illnesses, you're probably nothing. You probably never realised that you're carrying around an antibiotic-resistant organism. But if you're vulnerable, if you're elderly, or if you're potentially very young, there is potential for that organism to maybe get out of your gut and into another part of the body and start to cause you problems. What we're asking people to do is provide us with samples of their poo, essentially over a 2-year period. We had a phenomenal response. We were aiming to maybe recruit 150 water users and 150 non-water users, and we had almost 1,600 people who registered an interest in getting involved. It was fantastic.
Although popularity of sea swimming has been rising in recent years, it exploded during the pandemic. I'm bracing the cold morning weather to meet with sea swimming regulars who are taking part in the PEER project.
I've been sea swimming at least 36 years because I'm from Tuam, County Galway, so we used to hitch to Salt Hill, swim, get curry chips and hitch back home.
And what is it about it that is so good?
I love the feel of, I suppose, the wind on your skin, the actual swimming. I love swimming, so yeah. It doesn't matter that it's cold.
And Sean, you're a regular 40-footer.
Yeah, one of the early risers, so we're here at 5:45 in the water. So it's now in the dark, so I've had to get my light recently. There's a group visit here which we all just know each other from swimming. You know, there's the same camaraderie and there's a little bit of banter and people come and go, but you still see the same faces, you see them all, and you all keep an eye out for each other as well to a measure. And then some mornings, obviously, you come down here, and then there's the big gang down for the big sunrise, and
God,
all the posing and everything else, which is of great interest for those of us who are here more regularly.
What kind of motivated you to take part in the Pier project?
Well, I just came across it, but I thought, if it's something that I'm doing that can contribute to something that's of use, then that's fantastic.
How about you, Farron? Do you think about water quality when you're getting in, or do you just like, I just need the swim, I just need the swim?
Yeah, we're lucky here in a way that the water is tested during the summer, but unfortunately it's only tested during what's called the bathing season, so it's not tested the rest of the year. And most people that I swim with do swim year-round, so it means the water is not being tested for the majority of the time that we're swimming.
I do think the value is if we find out what's in the water, then we have a chance to do something about it. But I think it's the benefits of actually getting in that water. It's like a goal. And once you go in and you go in every morning, it's like you achieve a goal every day. So you get that feeling of achievement and it's very personal.
You're making me want to get in.
Good! Let's do it!
Well done, Kathriona. We've just got an amazing facility here on our doorstep, which actually very few people in the population get to use. Whether you're swimming it, canoeing it, you're surfing, you're sailing, whatever you're doing, it is really fantastic.
Yeah.
And it's great to see people using it.
The data is still being analysed. We suspect we might find similar to our colleagues in the UK that found that people who use the water are more likely to be colonised than those that don't. We're going to carry out a persistence survey as well. So in the persistence survey, we're asking those that were colonised originally to send us an additional samples, one every 2 months over a year period, to see does their colonisation status change over time.
So even though you've kind of half given me the fear of going swimming, I should actually take comfort in the fact that this research is happening, because it means that you're actually finding the problem areas and tracing them back and trying to stop them.
Yes, absolutely. So, we need to generate evidence. We know it's there, we've shown it's there, but we need to better understand, through the generation of data, how widespread the issue is. We're not trying to stop anybody getting it. It's fantastic. Everybody should get out and about and enjoy our blue spaces.
That's our 10 things to know about outdoor living. Next week, we examine the impacts of COVID-19 on our blood, and could a solution for plastic waste be found on the farm?